We'll now go to United News of India, and we have Ajit with us.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My question is just a short technical question. I wanted to understand that if inflammatory syndrome is there, like Kawasaki syndrome and other syndromes that you have observed, so is it that risk increases COVID-19 inflammatory syndrome?
So thanks for the question. We know so far very little about this inflammatory syndrome. We are hearing reports about this from a number of countries. We're very grateful for clinicians coming forward and sharing as much detail as they can about the patients that they are seeing with this syndrome. But as I mentioned before, what's really important right now is to determine how many of these children actually have this syndrome. We've given it a name, but we haven't actually described fully what the syndrome is. So what we've done is we put out a case definition which describes what it might be, what conditions, what illness, what symptoms these children may have, and we need to look. We need to have clinicians use this case definition to determine how many children fit that definition. And then we need specific data collected from each of those patients so that we could better describe what this is that we're seeing. Right now, we have the US CDC, the European CDC, WHO, a number of countries are on alert for this. We need all countries to be on alert for this and for clinicians to look out for this, what appears to be a very rare syndrome. And we need to understand if this syndrome is associated with COVID-19 or not. As I mentioned before, some of the children have not tested positive for COVID-19 while others have. So right now it's a bit of a confused picture. Although more information is coming, we need that information to come in a standardized way so we can describe what the syndrome is and if it is associated with COVID-19.
And I might just add, things like Kawasaki syndrome and toxic shock and other syndromes are very uncommon, but there is a background incidence. It happens in all populations, but at a very, very low rate. And it's a little like those of you who follow polio. We use a syndrome called acute flaccid paralysis to detect all children who have an unusual paralytic illness, and then we test all those children for poliovirus, and only in a very small number of them do we find the poliovirus. But that's the way we find the poliovirus for eradication, is by looking for a particular syndrome or a collection of symptoms. And in this case, we need to look at this collection of symptoms and then look at what's causing it. It will not all be caused by COVID-19. Another, I think, important point is as the number of cases of any particular disease grows to a very large number, you start to potentially notice much rarer syndromes. So you may not notice the disease emerge in a small group of 10 or 20,000 cases, but if you get to 90 or 100 or 1,000,000 cases, then what is a very rare potential side effect or consequence of the infection can become apparent. It doesn't mean that the disease is changing. It doesn't mean that the disease is changing in kids. What it means is when you get a very large number of children with the disease, you will see a very rare occurrence happen. And in a small number of children, you don't get a chance to see that. So it's very important to reassure parents out there that this does not represent a difference in the way this disease causes disease in children, or a difference in severity, or a change in the way the virus is behaving per se. What it most likely represents is a rare syndrome that may be associated with COVID-19 that we can observe when we have so many cases around the world. And I think that's important. It's very important we pursue it. It's very important we understand it. But it's also very important that parents and children understand that this is not reflecting a fundamental change in the way this virus infects children. Also, I did mention in a previous presser, this is a new disease. When new diseases cross the species barrier, they very often don't have what we would call a primary target organ. They very often can infect, and we see this respiratory syndrome, which we can recognize, people short of breath with pneumonia. We've also observed cardiovascular type syndromes. In other words, effects on the heart, effects on the blood system. We've seen effects on the brain and on the neurologic system, and reports of those diseases in older people as well. So, and what we don't know yet is whether those rare things that happen are associated directly with the virus, and the virus directly attacking the cells in those organs, or are we seeing also the result of the immune response to the virus? And in many emerging diseases, we see both happen. The virus itself can cause damage, and sometimes the immune response to the virus itself can cause damage. That's very much what happens in Ebola virus. Many people, for example, the bleeding associated that people see or have seen on the TV associated with Ebola infection, it's not the virus that causes the bleeding. It's very often the immune response to the presence of the virus that depletes the capacity of the blood to clot. So when a person bleeds, then the bleeding continues. So again, we need to sort out, number one, as Maria said, to what extent is COVID-19 associated with this rare syndrome? To what extent is this a direct effect of the virus? To what extent this may be related to the immune response to the virus, and what's causing what? And it's really important that we understand that, because that's the way we can develop countermeasures and therapies to reduce the impact of this disease, especially in kids.